It is my great pleasure today to introduce our guest, Reginald O'Neal, a great artist and a friend. Reggie grew up in Overtown, which is a historically Black neighborhood of Miami. And he began painting when he was 20. Since then, he participated in multiple collective and solo shows, residencies and public art projects all around the world, the Americas, different countries in Europe, Asia. I first met Reggie during an artistic residency in Spain. And a year later, we also met at a similar residency in Miami. For a collective show that took place during the Miami Art Basel in 2019, Reggie prepared an installation that transformed an elevator into a prison cell. The whole show was a huge, massive exhibition, but I can still very well remember the way that Reggie's piece stood out from the rest of the exhibits. And it was because of its single minimalist beauty, but mostly because of the immersive impact of the installation. So the size of the elevator, Reggie told us, approximated the space allotted to a single inmate in the American prison system. In the years since, Reggie focused on canvas, murals, though last year he also produced his first sculpture, a huge one, first. His art is closely related to the experience of his community, both the neighborhood of Overtown and more generally, Black America. The significance and value of his art has been recognized by many curators, prominent art museums and cultural institutions. So it's really my great pleasure to welcome you to our class. And Reggie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, I'm Reginald. I want to thank everybody I want to thank Anna for sharing the class, also for having me to share my work with you. I always thought that my work would not go so far, and now I'm lecturing in a class in Poland. So I think that is a great experience for me to be able to share my work with you guys. And so what I'm going to do now is present the work, most of the most recent work that I've been working on, and go through a line of a timeline almost in 2 different or 3 different bodies of work that I've created over the past, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And then we'll open up for questions and things of that nature. So I like to start off with this image of me and my teacher, my mentor, Axel Boyd. This is the reason why me and Anna and also Pablo met, because of me and Alex. Well, Alex started an organization called Void Projects and decided to do projects outside of the context of just like his self, right? He's a world-renowned like street artist, and when I met him, he was kind of known in the street art world, and then we began classes and teaching, and also began this very beautiful friendship and brotherhood along. And I think that this image for sure kind of captures what the studio was like for 6 years of me and him, like being in the same space, and me learning lessons and also just talking about things. So our relationship started like I think early in 2012 or 13, where my neighborhood was right next to a community called Wynwood, which is a very known neighborhood for street art, and a lot of street artists would come from all over the world to come to Miami and paint inside of this neighborhood. And so I grew up right next to it, and before knowing about this community, I knew nothing about painting or street art or anything, and wasn't a painter at all. And I would go back to this neighborhood and go to some of the stores. I also had a job there, and I met a couple of friends that then eventually met Alex, and through other street art friends that I didn't know of their lifestyle, that they were traveling and doing all of these things and going all to different parts of the world to paint. And so I eventually met Alex, and then I was in one of his films, and then we started to go teach. He started to teach me teach me how to paint. And then I think within 6 months of meeting him, it was the first trip I took to Europe. So the first trip I went to Austria, and then went to Spain and Galicia, and then went to Norway, and then also went to Berlin, and then that kind of like sparked the relationship between me and him, and that was kind of the dynamic of our class, really. So whenever I go back to the States, we would go to his house in Miami, and then we would be in his house, and then I would be painting and doing class. And then we, in the summer, would travel back to Europe or to other places to do murals. So my class was kind of the world. Instead of like sitting inside of a class, I didn't really go to school at all for painting. It was just like me and him. So it was like a traditional mentorship. And this lasted for 6 or 7 years. And so I was like to start with this. And here I will begin with the work that I've been creating, the most recent, and sharing some of my thoughts and also my concepts about it too. So this is a portrait, self-portrait of myself that I painted last year for my birthday. I kind of created this tradition to do a self-portrait every year, and this is when I had dreadlocks. I had really, really long locks for 11 years, and I cut them off last year. And I did this painting right before I cut them off. And so this is like me being inside of my old studio that I had inside of Miami, and it was a part of this organization called Light, and it was a two-year residency, which doesn't matter about this context, but it was a portrait that I did of myself with the light coming through the window, and something that I thought about previously when I got the studio. So it's just like a kind of a document of where I was in that moment, in that time. And now just a different person now. I look completely different. This is a portrait of my mom that I did in 2020. This is this is the first or second portrait that I did of my mom. And at this point, I was painting for 8 years or 9 years. And for me, this is very, very significant because it was so hard to try to, I feel like I use painting as a medium to convey either a message or my emotions or my daily life. And for me, my mom is like most people's mother, it's like very, very, very significant to them. But I think to actually paint a portrait of her is to try to translate my actual feelings for her, and how important she is in my life. And so this was one of the first portraits I did of her, and I think the only portraits I did of her. And I tried to do one before and it wasn't in a natural state. And this is her sitting on the edge of her bed like she will always do in her room, while she was ironing clothes on the side of her bed. And I thought that this was a very significant moment, a pure and honest moment for me to try to portray my mom in her natural state. So it was, I did it before and it wasn't enough. And so when I did this one, it was very, very, like I said, again, it was honest, and I felt like it really captured her presence and her purity, and also the way in which I think about her too. So something that you would think of, that I would explain a lot is inside of the work is like, in some ways it's loaded, but it's loaded to me. Like it's things that I think about in my belief systems too. And so I try to, with image making, convey these things. This is a portrait of my dad. If you could see the title, I think it's called Roach. So it's called Roach, and that's something that my dad used to be called when he was younger. He also is called that now. But this is him when he was 5 or 6 years old. And I painted this, and it was a part of an installation that Anna kind of mentioned earlier. It was like a different segment of that installation where I wish I had the photos to the installation, but I built a prison cell. Yeah, it's a portrait of my dad when he was younger. So the installation was kind of talking about the absence and also presence of him while being incarcerated. My dad was in prison for 21 years for drug trafficking. And the installation, I built a cell inside of a room, and outside of that cell, but also still inside of a room, and try to explain it better with the pictures. I had flowers underneath the painting, so you couldn't really see the painting up close. You had to see it from a distance. And the flowers inside of the room were decaying as the show was going along. So it's really talking about how this human being is put inside of this this context where it's almost like a animal inside of, or a chicken inside of a coop or something like this, where in America, there's not that much leisure that you could have, or there's not that much rehabilitation inside of the prison system. It's almost similar to putting animals inside of a cage and things of that nature, where they treat human beings like this. And also they make them work. And so that thing is like, the installation is talking about a person that's very, very significant to me, being put inside of this context. So it's like how to ask the question of how the government can treat people and who are fathers, sons, uncles, nephews, and friends to some people in a manner. And I think that the result is that they just don't care about people. So, but it's also rejoicing on how we were able to keep the connection with my father and also keep his spirit up while doing such a long period of time inside of prison. This is my uncle Reggie. This is so my dad name is Reggie, my name is Reggie, Reginald, and this is my uncle on my mother's side, whose name is Reginald also. And this is a portrait of him outside of my grandmother's house, who he used to live with. And he is 65 years old now, so he's my mother's older brother. And this is a person, like I said before, my dad was in prison for 21 years, so that's a big chunk of my life. And my uncle is somebody that has been extremely present in my life as a male figure. And so I think that for me, it's really honoring him in a way, and his like strength also. But his life wouldn't be something that would be in somewhat honorable. He's just a regular man that is, he has in the neighborhood, he's really known for fixing people's cars and fixing people's bicycles and cleaning up their houses if he needs money or need extra money. He would ride his bike around the entire neighborhood every day, and everybody knew him. He would say hi. A very well-mannered person, but he's just a regular person. And I think that to be a painter and knowing the history of painting and like why it was used before as like to uphold the royalty and things of that nature. And I think that with this medium and understanding its history, it's a way in which I could preserve people that is normal and that is royalty in some sort to me. So it's like taking this very celebrated medium to capture people and stories that I'm tied to too. So like I said, this is a very significant person in my life, and in some ways a role model to me, because now that I see like his hair and his dreadlock is something that I did also back then. Like he when I grew my dreads is almost similar to his. He never showed his hair, and so for me, this portrait is like really his pure self, because he never shows his hair, and he allowed me to see it and take a photo of it and portray him in this way. So this is the title piece of my first solo show that I had in Miami at the Feet of Mountains. During 2020, during COVID, I know everybody else in the world was on lockdown, and this is like in the heart of COVID, where all of my friends are outside, and we were like adults. We are adults now, and in some way, it was such a beautiful like restart for me and us too, because in the process of COVID, we stayed in a neighborhood that was like a gated community, and this allowed us to just like enjoy each other again. And so we wasn't really following COVID protocols. We were going outside and playing basketball and football and talking and things of that nature, not wearing masks, and nobody ever got sick, which is kind of odd. But this is like a moment to where we were playing football and these two people were discussing about a significant play. And for me, this is like a moment in which I think that these people are not really paying attention to a camera or paying attention to an audience. They're just being, right? And I think that for me, the title of the piece is Being at the Feet of Mountains. Is almost being a student of nature, no? And allowing nature to take its course. And to me, I think that a lot of times in America, and especially in the way in which they perceive communities in which I grew up in, they don't think that in some way that we're people, that we're normal, and that we have families and talk about things that are important or just have regular lives. And so I think for me, this is something that I understand and that I could kind of be a fly on the wall within inside of the context in which I'm normal at. I could separate myself for a little bit and also just appreciate in which the people that I'm surrounded by, and be a student and allow them to teach me as well as teach other people. So for me, this is just us being in our normal state. And in America, I feel like there's a lot of subliminal ways in which they could depict Black men for sure on who they are and how dangerous they could be and how they're prisoners, they're criminals and things of that nature. And for me, this is them being normal. This is a context that a lot of people won't put themselves into because of they're fearful or they think a certain way about these people. And for me, it's a way in which we don't have to like dilute ourselves to particular people to be appreciated. So for me, it's a way to just portray us in our normal state. So I don't know if you could see my mouse, but there's a guy that's on the left next to a guy that's on the far left, and there's a bigger guy that's right next to the guy with the white t-shirt. This is my best friend. It's one of my best friends. I grew up with him my entire life. We stayed in the same community for 20 plus years, and I'm really, really close with him and his family. And this painting, I say that to say that this is a painting of his sister, his younger sister, Tigeria, and she's a mother now and she's all grown, but I remember when she first came home from the hospital from when she was a baby. And this is an image of her, like when I was in their house, I was talking to the family and stuff like that, and she was washing dishes, and I was talking and kind of came across this like moment in which she was painting. I mean, she was painting. She was washing dishes, and I thought to like paint this thing because I thought it was a very beautiful moment. The fact that she's an older woman now and she's has a child, and she's taking care of the household. And I don't know, for some reason it kind of reminded me of her older sister. She has 3 older sisters, and she's the youngest out of all of the siblings. And now she's grown and kind of taking care of the house. And it also reminds me of her mother. All of them have the same like body language in a way and almost the same attitude. And their mother passed away back in 2011. And for some reason, this kind of reminded me of her mother being inside of that same house, doing the things that she would do when she was born in a way. So I just thought this was a very beautiful moment for me to try to capture and present to people, although it's very, very normal. If you could see, like the dates are like jumping, but I think it doesn't matter. So this is a tree that grows inside of Miami. It's called the golden trumpet tree. It's actually like it's going on now. It's in the spring. It's when they start to blossom. But it's a very, very normal tree, and I think that for me, it was a period of time where I wanted to step into doing nature, like paintings of nature. And this in particular is something that grabbed my attention a long time ago when I was a kid, and I just never thought of painting it, or I never thought too much of it until I became a painter, and also until I started to think about what I want to portray, and that would things in nature that would be very significant to my surroundings. And the golden trumpet tree is something that's very, 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 very prominent, and it's almost all over the city in Miami. But I think that after I painted this, I realized that a lot of people started to pay attention to it. I'm not saying that nobody pays attention to it because of my paintings, but before my paintings, but I think that a lot of my friends and my family members would send me pictures of this tree like afterwards. And it's kind of like this thing that it kind of sparked this awareness that I feel like I had also when I started to paint nature. I started to pay a lot more attention to just things that I was surrounded. And this will I will go into a segment with this presentation of like a body of work that I did of landscapes. And then I will give a description of how this ties to the last little bit of paintings that I did. So this is a rose bush in France when I went to France in 2021. I was taking a walk I painted a mural in France in 2021. And this was a bush of roses that I would see on my day-to-day walk, commute to my mural. And so it's just, again, me paying attention to nature a little bit more than usual, and wanting to depict these things and step away from figurative work for a little bit. This is also of a flower, a patch of grass and flowers that was in France too. It's a photo that I took while I was there and decided to paint. There's a flower in the window.
It's interesting because you can easily tell that it's an American window. Like
Really?
completely
Don't look like this.
the windows open in a different way.
Right, right. They open like this, don't it?
Like the doors.
Like the doors. That's crazy. That's so funny. I didn't even think about that. This is a cotton. I think a friend of mine yesterday mentioned this, and they asked me why did I depict cotton, and for me, this is of course, it's a very significant thing with African American culture and also the American culture and also the world in a way. And to me, my mother moved to Alabama, which is like in the South of America. Alabama also, the South was very, very important when it came to crop and agriculture. And also like the active slavery lasted a little bit longer in the South more than the rest of the country. But for me, it's very, very, this is a very, I would say, confronting moment for myself. Because when my mother moved to Alabama, it was the first time I actually seen a cotton field. So in Miami, it's a big city where we don't have that much agricultural presence there. There's a lot of like trees and things of that nature, but like farmland, it's not that much lasting for in a way. And so for me, like when I helped my mother move to Alabama, it was the first time I seen a cotton field and seeing cotton inside of this field. And for me, it took me by storm that, you know, these are the fields that people like me and my ancestors would work in for hours in, and this happened for hundreds of years. And so for me, I think it was a very confronting thing that this is a part of American history, but also just the fact that this is just a plant. When you think about cotton now, it's like everybody has it on. It's so engraved in our clothing now, and also industries to where which you don't need people anymore to harvest this thing and pick it. And so I think to actually like look at this plant is just something that is it's a part of the earth, but the fact that people had to go through so much stuff, so many things to harvest this one thing, I think that it's almost a confronting, but also just a very, very grounding thing to where it's like this, it's just a plant at the end of the day. So I think for me to do a portrait or some sort of this thing, it has this balance of like how normal it is and how heavy this material is too. So, and this is like a different course of my body of work than something that I'm doing now and something that I started 2 years ago. And it's of figurines, of Black figurines, musician figurines. These figurines is something that I found in New Orleans. So New Orleans and Louisiana in American culture is responsible for jazz music. And you go there now, it's a very, very big culture still surrounding that also celebrates jazz music and also African American history too. It's very, very prominent in New Orleans. It's a really, really sacred place. And for me, this is something that I found on my trip there. It's a souvenir. So the fact that it's a very, very big place for jazz culture, there's souvenirs that you could find inside of gift shops and things of that nature. But these ones in particular that I collected are very, very old. So they have this very old style of like of souvenirs. It's this very old style of souvenirs, and they have like a bunch of them where they're playing different instruments. And so this is a very big painting, but the souvenir is like 7 inches or so. And this is like the start of the body of work that I began and that I'm kind of continuing investigating. So with painting, like I said before, painting is something that I like to like try to convey messages and things of that nature or concepts in ways and things that I think about. And so for me, this is just, again, like a material and it's this object. And to me, I give it this concept in a way. And it also has like this lingering like attachment to culture and also music and how people could collect parts of culture without being investigated, and interested in it. And so for me, these figurines kind of is symbolic for a bunch of things, right? So the fact that this figurine is laying on his back, the positioning of the figurines could have different meanings and different interpretations. And that's what I try to do with the figurines. I have so many of them. I have, I think, 12 of them, and all have different instruments. But the fact that I can position them in different ways, it gives off a different reading, like I said. So the fact that this one is laying down is not necessarily a meaning at all. It was just the way in which my studio was set up. It was horizontal, more horizontal than vertical. And so I figured out a way in which I could paint this thing. But it started this like way of like investigation, whereas I could do so many other things and positions to make it have different readings. And this one is so with the fact that this is a figurine of a Black performer, it makes me question, or it makes me investigate and also question the audience about the culture of collectibility, right? And so in the art world, I'm inside of a culture that I'm not very knowledgeable of. Like growing up, I didn't grow up in, I wasn't taught about American art history and things of that nature, and how contemporary art works, and also art markets, and how people buy your work and collect it, and it raises in value and all of these things. I knew nothing of it. And the fact that I'm an African-American artist and Black artist at this particular time, this is a time which a lot of the art market is very strong in Black work. And so for me, when I was doing paintings of my family members and my friends, I started to get, my work started to get acquired by people who didn't necessarily understand or care in a way I think, or be investigated in the people that were inside of the paintings. It was just, I wonder if it was a question. I don't know if they care or not, but it was a question of, well, if these are paintings of people of a culture that you know nothing about, why is it important for you to collect it? And so it started to make me think about the idea and the concept of slavery, and how people went to Africa to collect people, and in America think of them and make laws and things of that nature, of like why these people are not actually people. Like there's a law inside of the Constitution in America. I think it still reigns true today, and it's still in the Constitution, where it's written that people of African descent or Black people are 3/5 of a whole human being. So if you were to do back then a crime towards them, you wouldn't get punished as if you were doing crime to an actual human being, because they were considered, and as law, they were considered as 3/5 of a whole person. And they were also traded and sold like animals and like product. And so for me, this particular concept of or investigation of this figurine is how these things tie to the idea of slavery, and commodification ties to artwork, and also Black culture now, right? So Black culture, as we all know, has contributed a lot to the world, and also to America for sure. With rather it be music, rather it be free labor, rather it be culture, rather it be culinary food in America. And for me, it's like these industries and all of these places are created around the labor of Black people, but not really considering Black people and having a fair trade with them, with us, to be properly compensated for our contribution. And the fact that this is a jazz musician or a singer, it also makes me question about how this pertains to music also, and also artwork, I mean, in paintings too. This is a bass player. So this one is it's 7 feet, which I don't know how to translate in meters, but it's very big.
Yeah, so 150 by 220.
Okay. And this one is very tiny. So like, again, I was saying the changing of positions could convey different messages. Also, with this one, it was inspired by Miles Davis, which is a jazz musician in America, or was a jazz musician in America. It's one of the most popular and one of the most prominent jazz musicians in the culture. And something that he used to do when he would perform is play with his back turned. The people always thought it was disrespectful, and I think his response was like he liked to hear the music better. And so in this world of art, it reminds me of how as artists, the people who collect work who may not be interested, or performers like jazz musicians back then used to perform for an all-white audience before, and couldn't perform for their own people in certain instances. And so it's really like this person who is performing this thing that he loves is in tune with himself, and also performing for himself in a way, and living with his passion rather than trying to entertain mostly a crowd that doesn't consider him as a human being. And so it's really taking its ownership of just like, well, this is the thing that I have to do in order to survive, but also this is also a thing I love in a way. And so it only matters to me most, and never getting those two things confused. And so I think that this was like trying to convey that particular message of like, to myself, and also to other people who are doing whatever it is that they do, to make sure you stay connected to the thing that you love, rather if the industry is not considerate of your passions. They only want to be entertained. The accordion is, I think this one is 2 meters by 1, so it's like, and that's it.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have so many notes, and yeah, it was it's really many artists are not talking about their art, but the way you talk about it, it's, I mean, I have seen all the images before, but hearing you speak about them really definitely deepened my contact with the artwork. So thank you for that. Camille, do you think you will be able to chair the Q&A?
So are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so I will pass the microphone.
So you mentioned that the musician stuff that you are doing right now is something that you will consider for the future, about the appreciation of the art and about the commodity of artwork. But do you think there are other things that you will see in your future more, I don't know, rebellious or ground?
Yeah, I think for me, like the landscapes, like last year I had a show with the landscapes, which I wish I had an image of the landscapes and the figurines together. And I think that this is the reason for the Q&A, so I could go more in depth with these things. But so the landscapes and the figurines work together, and so these are two bodies of work that kind of collide in a way, and they're talking about one particular thing. And the glue to both of these bodies of work was Louis Armstrong. So I had 2 paintings, 2 screenshots that I got from YouTube, paintings that I did of Louis Armstrong. So it's both, there's both interpretations of like the same performance that he did with What a Wonderful World. And so the name of my show was called And I Think to Myself. And it's a snippet that's took from the actual song. And it's talking about being aware. It's almost similar to being aware of the context, right? So in the 2 paintings, which I wish I could show you, is him singing and like have his eyes closed and he's smiling like he would normally do. And then there's this other snapshot in the middle of that performance of him looking directly into the crowd. So it's really talking about him being like really exploring or investigating this this moment. For me, I don't know what it was that he was thinking, but for me, what it invoked is how he was an African-American man that was performing for a predominantly white audience, and that he, in that particular time during segregation, wasn't again considered as a human being. So it's really him being aware of the audience, in which it's like these people are almost like hypocrites in a way. And so it's tying these both 2 things together, where this African-American man is singing about the world in which we all share, but is not seen as a person. So there's this figurine that is like the commodity, and also the casting of a person that is like used for this particular thing, but also the paintings of the florals is of an actual human being that is perceiving the world like me, right? So the flowers and the flowers that I've painted is things that I see, and it's from the perspective of a human being, and it has nothing to do with my color, my gender, or any of these things. It's just a person, right? And so for me, those are things that I'm going to explore in the future. So now in September, I'm going to do a show of all figurines, and in the future, I'm going to do a show at some point of all like florals. I want to be the Monet of this generation. but yeah, I do, to answer your question, I do want to do more floral work and landscapes.
So actually, I have a question. And I saw that your artworks are mostly painted with dark colors, also the backgrounds, nature, landscapes. And I was wondering if you maybe could talk a bit more about your color palette choices.
So for me, I think it's really hard because I think that for me, I'm still learning about like a palette in particular and what I want it to do. I think I just follow like the image in which I like take. So if I like an image and I find it to be very, very beautiful, like I've learned color theory a little bit and also learned how to paint and mix colors and make colors that I want. But to actually think of a palette and be very, very considerate of a palette, I don't think that I have there's an actual like knowledge and like very premeditated like thought that goes behind like my palette, but I do like the presence of light inside of my work and how light hits things. And we think that light is only like white hitting something, but it's like it has all of these colors when light and darkness is mashed together. It is an in-between of just like a variation of colors. And so for me, I think that most importantly, my if I don't think about like color, I think my intention or my premeditated thought about painting things is the presence of light, if you've seen that in a way. So a lot of the paintings are very, very dark, so the contrast of light could be very, very strong. So I think of that a lot more than color choice and color palette for sure.
Thank you.
In a lot of your paintings, your subjects are either we see them from the side or they're kind of facing away from the audience or the viewer. And I was curious about the artistic intent or the thought process behind that.
So that is also really intentional. It's intentional, and also I don't like people facing like I feel like sometimes like when I take pictures of my family or my friends, the fact that they're facing me is almost like they're not in an honest state. Like if I'm looking away and minding my own business or walking in the street, I'm not facing people I'm going on about my life. And I think that for me to talk about or portray people in a way that they're in their own state of being, it's like only a particular people could actually understand who these people are or have a connection to these people in a different way. So it's like I did a painting of a friend of mine that had his back turned and his hair was a particular way. It was like the way in which we grow our hair in my neighborhood, right? It's almost like this tribal thing. I think that I connected it to tribes in different places. Like if you have like scarification, it symbolizes a particular thing. And if you know of the symbols, you have a different connection to a particular person or a tribe if you know them well enough. And for me, this hairstyle that he had is very, very significant to the way in which I grew up. It's the way I grew my hair when I was younger. The hair that I just cut off, it was a significant way that I grew my hair. It's not that different, but it's just something that was very, very present in my community. And the fact that he had his back turned, it was like I could understand where he probably comes from, if in the context of Miami, just by his hair. I know it sounds very, very absurd, but I think that for me, it's something that I feel like only certain people could recognize. And so the fact that he doesn't have to explain himself or face me, it's like I could kind of see who he is by his attire or his accessories that he has on his body. So I think that for me, that's what it's really about. It's like if you could connect to a person in a certain way, he doesn't have to, or he or she doesn't have to face you or face the audience in a way for you to understand it.
Right, and in your self-portrait, you're also not facing the audience, right? And your hair is the central element of the composition. Was that a similar idea behind that?
Not really. So that one, it was like it's sometimes I come across images that are very, or ideas that are very simple, and it was a way. I think for me, like the light that was coming from the window, it was like a way in which I could face it. and have like this light that's on my shoulder, like kind of gradually go down like my shirt, but the presence of the light being from the front. And so I just thought of a technical way in which I could paint a particular thing, but I didn't think of like, I'm not going to face the audience. But also now that I think about it, it's a way in which I never see myself from, like I never see my presence without my face. I always see myself in the mirror or reflection or looking myself in the mirror, but I never see myself from my own backside. Now that I think about it, it's something that I just thought about, but there was no intentional intent behind it.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask, because in your paintings, you present women doing the house chores. So do you think in the Black community, women are often put inside this box that their main point is to take care of their family and that's it?
No, I didn't even think about that. But I think no, but it is, I mean, for sure it is something that, that's a whole different conversation, but I think it's not something that I did intentionally, but I think that is also a place in which Black women are unconsciously put and also like consciously put. So yeah, that's a whole wormhole I could go down. I think that, like, again, like when I talk about like my dad being in prison for 21 years, that's one particular story. So there has been like I think me and a friend of mine was talking about it recently, about how there has always been an attack on Black families in America, where they would take men, they slowly found a way to take men out of the household. So a lot of my friends in my neighborhood didn't grow up with fathers in the household if they were like either on drugs or in prison or just not there, because there's a way in which women could get free housing and things of that nature if the man is not in the household. Also, the prison system has 1 million Black fathers or something like that. It's a statistic that I came across recently, where I think there's 1 million Black fathers that's in prison. Also, in history, there has been the breeding and selling of men too. So there's a lineage of things that have been put on the Black men, so where the Black woman has to like have a lot of responsibility. So in history, like the Black women had to take care of the household of the master and also take care of their own children, and also take care of their man while being the mistress of the master and cotton fields too. So it's like through time that builds culture in ways in which a lot of the weight is put on Black women, and so the responsibility and also the contribution has fell a lot on Black women in America. I don't want to even like go down that rabbit hole, but that is an interesting point, I think, that you or a question that you asked for sure.
And you mentioned your dad a couple of times, and on your Instagram, I saw a painting in which your father is juxtaposed against the background of your ancestors. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of establishing a connection between the past and the present in your art?
So I think it comes from just like history, right? Like when you understand history, it's like, you know how certain things like show up again. For me, like prison was such a normal thing in my community, because a lot of the people that are my dad's age or my older brother's age or my uncle's age were in prison. So it was like normal. Until I started to learn about this thing and how there's a pipeline, what we call it a public school to pipeline, a public school to prison pipeline. So where it's almost like this theory that they kind of breed you from public school for prison, right? You learn about these things, and you also learn about history and how slavery was a way in which they held people in bondage and controlled people in a way, and also made them contribute to companies and things of that nature. So for me, it's creating this juxtaposition of how things are still, like how in America or in the world in which we think that things have changed so drastically and that everybody has a better life and you know, everything is like good. But when you do research and you also like is exposed to a lot of things, a lot of the truths in the world, you start to realize that a lot of things haven't changed. And so for me to learn about the prison industrial complex and how America specifically has like how a lot of African Americans or Black people are in have ended up in prison through like time is almost like asking the question of why is it only African Americans or Black people, or not only it's white people that are in white Americans, and also Latinos and things of that nature. So it's a great deal of like a bunch of cultures inside of prison, but it's more African Americans, and that question is like why, really, and like what has actually changed in culture. And so there's these people that are working in the cotton fields, but also a lot of prisons are privately owned, and a lot of them are responsible for hiring, like having free labor too. So they pay prisoners a very, very cheap wage to build certain things and make certain things inside of prison. So like they have, it's almost a way in which they have free labor, because prisoners, like if they want to work and pay for their food inside of prison, sometimes they have jobs that are connected to companies. Like Walmart is a big shopping center in the States, and a lot of the products come from prison work. So it's like a thread line between the past and present, and how these things show up and are still going on today. And the fact that that's my father, it makes it more personal, I think. You know, you find out that your father is a part of the system. It's like, yeah, it's just a way in which I could talk about, you know, I can't talk about anybody else's situation. I think that it's very, very true to me. So
Okay, so I wanted to ask about this shift I saw from you at first painting real life figures that you experienced firsthand and had a personal connection to still painting people, but in this glass figurine form. What is behind this change? Do you see humanity in those glass figurines, and how you feel about shifting away from painting real people to those glass figurines?
I think for me, I think, like I said at the beginning of the talk, like painting is something that like I like. One thing that I like about like art in general, like if I'm a poet or if I'm a musician, is how like I could have these experiences and these truths in order to, and have art in order to like translate these things in a different way. And so for me, the transition is really me talking about like my father and slavery, and combining these things. It's something that I feel like I know about, but also things that I've experienced. And the people in which I'm surrounded by is like something that I used to paint a lot. But I think for me, this is like an honest way, and it's like actual moments in which I live. But for me, the figurine work is something that's very conceptual. It's a way in which I could metaphorically or symbolically speak about things that I also experience too. So I kind of stepped away. It's that, and it's also just like this this feeling of people collecting or buying work of people that I know and that I care about. And it's not like I'm selling these things and I'm being like very, very sad about it, but it's also like it's this investigation, like I said, on collectors, right? Where a person could buy a work from a person that they don't know or don't even care about the culture, and put it up on their wall and be like, and think of, oh, I have this painting of this person's mother. Like I had a talk similar to this one, and a woman who I sold a painting to was like, said that, oh, we're really happy that we have this painting of your mother and this, that, and the third. And I thought to myself, and I also said like, well, it's just an object, right? It's a painting. It's a 2D, two-dimensional thing. But the person inside is actually my mother. And what I feel and what I try to convey inside of that painting is it falls so short of what I actually experienced with my mother. And so this idea of collecting things and feeling, sure enough, we could feel things from paintings and artwork, but it's like this investigation of like, well, are people really collecting things that they want to be connected to, that they're detached from, but they want to have a connection to, or are they collecting things because of their own personal interests? And so it's using these figurines is almost symbolic for a person, but also symbolic for the actual thing of a painting. It's like, it's conceptually talking about just like this world of material and things. So it's like things that I think about for sure, and that I've thought about before. I don't know if that answered your question. It was kind of long.
All right, and we have a question from Amelia, so go on.
You want to type it in the chat? Okay.
So maybe just to fill in the silence, I will ask a question and then we'll proceed with Amelia's question after she types it. In one of the video materials that we were sent before this meeting, you describe your teenage self as isolated and observant.
Yes.
And I was curious how this isolation impacted or influenced you honing in your observational skills as an artist and as a painter.
I think they go hand in hand. Like, I mean, I grew up in a very, very big community. And so I was always around my friends. And I think that when I talked about isolation, in school, in high school, I used to in lunch, I used to sit so far in the corner of the lunch cafeteria by myself. And I would be there for 15 minutes alone until my friends and stuff started to come towards me after they get their lunch. And that, I think, thinking about those particular moments in high school, I just used to look at everybody in the lunch cafeteria, and also in class. I used to sit in the back of the class when I was younger. And I used to draw a lot too when I was younger, but I used to observe a lot, and I don't think that it was something that was very intentional. It was just something that I gravitated towards because I was really shy too and introverted. But also my community made me kind of cool because my neighborhood was really cool, So it wasn't like I was isolated and weird. I was isolated and everybody thought I was okay. We're gonna go to this question.
Can you read it out loud?
Do you think it's possible to separate art from politics or politics from art nowadays to create politically unengaged art? Yes, I think it is possible, but I think me and Anya's husband, Pavel, was talking about this earlier, or we were talking about this a few days ago about it's something that I think that I was thinking about even after that conversation of separating my artwork from Blackness, right? If I do a painting of a landscape, it's rooted in Blackness too, right? Because I think about my ancestors who weren't allowed this leisure in the country. And also I think about people before colonization who had this leisure and that was living in their own set of rules and things of that nature where they didn't have to follow anybody else's culture. And so when I paint landscapes, it's all of these things that are connected to it. So I don't think for me, it's something that it kind of dawned on me as can I do something that's not politically loaded or whatever? And I think it's possible. I think the more and more I do landscapes, or the landscapes is a part of my culture and my ancestry, but and it's part of those things and politically loaded, but it's also at the root of it, the landscapes is something that I enjoy too. If like I said, as a human being, you walk across a bush of roses, I think about, wow, these are beautiful. And then my second thought is almost or my rootedness is I wasn't intended to enjoy these things by the society, and the context in which they put us in, and also the mentality I feel like a lot of people have in my community that has been forced on them. You can't be certain things or you can't be interested in certain things. So every time I'm traveling, the fact that I'm in Spain right now is very, very odd and also normal to me too, because I always think man, I'm not supposed to be here because my father is in prison. I grew up in a community that was heavily influenced by drugs and gun violence and things of that nature. So I wasn't even supposed to think this far. And the fact that I'm here, it's well, it's becoming more normal, but I also think about a lot of friends that won't allow themselves to be here. I have conversations with friends and they're why are you going there? And it's why am I not going there? And I have to think about these two things. So I think for me, it's really, really hard. It's really hard to separate myself from the political stance and think about my who I am as a person. But I think it's very, very, I think it's possible for sure. And I think that it's a good thing when people do that too. that things don't have to be so politically loaded. It could just be a form of like, oh, I like this bottle that's sitting on this table. I'm gonna paint this bottle that's sitting on the table, and it doesn't have to do with anything. You know?
In one of the videos that we were sent, you said that you would like to own a painting by Monet, and you also mentioned him today. So can you talk about like, the influence of Impressionism on your artistic taste or your own paintings?
So I as like detailed as I do paint some paintings, I really gravitate towards Impressionism because it's like this to me, it's like this motion picture thing, right? Like it's something that it's like it's a snapshot of a moment, but the moment is like it's moving. It's not like necessarily like finely detailed. Like you could be looking at somebody while having a conversation, they could be constantly moving. And I feel like Impressionism is that. And it also draws you into like being present, but also I think that the way in which these people like broke the rules of like artistic practice of of depicting certain things was something that I think that I gravitated towards when I started painting. There's that, but there's also like I mentioned Monet and I mentioned a lot of the Impressionist movements, and I think about the things that they painted, which was like everyday life, where it'd be a landscape or something. And it's like this thing that I'm talking about with leisure. It's like what Amelia asked just recently about being separate from politics. And I was talking to a friend who lives here in Cadiz about this particular like perspective. And he was saying, you know, that these people just had that leisure, they had that privilege to be in those positions. And I think about like, again, like it's hard for me to separate the politicalness of it, because I'm like, well, if they have that leisure, I should be able to have that same leisure. But you think about the history of America, people like me was stripped of that leisure. You had to like work really, really hard to find that in your day to day. And so I think that for me, it's like this, it's something that I appreciate a lot, because I think that their choice of color and the way in which they apply certain things and their accuracy with less information, but also a lot of information, is something that I want to like do myself, and it's something that I really, really appreciate. But also just something that I want to include in my art practice of like this like painting in plein air, and also just being present inside of a space and just doing exactly what I see. So yeah, I think that's my connection to the Impressionist movement for sure. I really, really like that era.
Okay, so I think that's it for the Q&A, unless we have some questions from the chat. No.
No.
Okay. So thank you very much for the wonderful talk and the Q&A. Maybe let's give our speaker.
Thank you.
So thank you, Reggie. It was so great to listen to you, to look at your paintings. Right. Thank you, everybody, for questions. And yes, so this is all for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.